Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. We're on episode 2, and I'm here with Mel to talk about the latest news. But before we do that, we're going to go through our favorite tweets of the day, which is to say probably the stupidest things we saw on Twitter. So this, today. So this was a top contender for me. Senator Randy Fine, I think he's from Florida's 6th district or something like that, depicted with an American flag on one side and an Israeli flag on the other, saying, taking advantage of the downtime in between electoral college meetings to work on advancing my bill to make sure no political flags are flown in government buildings. There are so many stupid things about this tweet, I don't know where to start. First of all, I would say that flying the flag of another country is somewhat political. So he seems to be against his own bill, or acting against his own. So I don't get that. And then the Israeli flag is higher up than the American flag, as many observers have noted.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I know what he's doing with that. So they are going to label the Palestinian flag as a political flag, and he is trying to be banned. That's what that's about, right? Because heaven forbid, I wouldn't even be surprised if they move that and try to make it to the keffiyeh, even, some kind of a flag that you wrap around your neck. I could totally see it. But of course, it's just insane. So he's like part of the Electoral College. I think he's one of the voters for Florida. I mistakenly thought because he got the endorsement of Trump, I thought for some reason that he had been appointed by DeSantis already. So he was already in Congress, but apparently there's special election in like 50 days or something like that, maybe even less than that, to fill the seat. He'll probably win because he has the whole backing of the Florida GOP. And the man is, and so apparently his first order of business is to take out the old First Amendment.
How do you not see the hypocrisy? I'm genuinely confused.
Oh, he does. He is so shameless. There's zero doubt in my mind. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing with that Israeli flag, standing taller than the American flag. He is shameless in his just really kind of contempt for anyone that even stands up just a modicum to Israel, to Jewish supremacy, to Zionist control of the government in any way, shape, or form. He's a psycho. He's crazy. Yeah. He really is crazy. And I say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw some of his tweets a few months ago, and I was like, okay, my day is like already ruined. I need to see more of this. So now moving on to Mel's favorite tweet of the day. I'll let her read and explain the context for this one.
So one of the bad guys, the Bronze Age pervert guy, he tweeted out like yesterday that automatic DNA paternal tests should be, or paternity tests should be mandatory at birth, so that men can be trapped into paying for children, child support for children that aren't theirs, which is just ludicrous in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I posted about that, but this guy's responding to me, and he responded on the wrong tweet, so he ended up deleting this. This cracked me up. Maybe instead of the guy keeping in his pants, maybe the chick should hold an aspirin between her knees. Ever look at it that way? No, Curtis. In fact, I have absolutely never looked at it that way. Not once. I can tell you that for sure. An aspirin between her knees. I think that's like a thing, but I don't actually get it.
It is. There's something. Yeah, there was something they used to say like back in the 50s, something along those lines, but I don't know exactly what it was. Well, let's hope he's a parody account.
Right. Is that like supposed to be like a homemade abortion or something, or is it like a?
No, I think it's like if you're holding something between your knees, you can't. Can't spread your legs. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they thought about all the positions, but we'll get into that another time.
I was like, what? Like, It's weird. Different world. But yeah, that just cracked me up. I quote tweeted him, telling him to blink twice if he was being held hostage and needed help. Because it was just because he actually responded to the wrong tweet, but I knew which one he was talking about, but he ended up deleting it and post it. So yeah, that was good fun this afternoon. Yeah.
Well, so I think one of the big topics today is Tucker Carlson interviewing Jeffrey Sachs. He's done a series of sort of controversial interviews, including with Daryl Cooper, who is a really great sort of contemporary historian. Yeah. Who has a different take on World War II and Winston Churchill than sort of the mainstream historians, and was unfairly, in my opinion, lambasted as like a Holocaust denier and an anti-Semite, when that's exactly like the opposite of what he is. But and so everybody is apoplectic now, or at least Zionist Twitter is apoplectic over Tucker Carlson interviewing Jeffrey Sachs, who's a professor at Columbia, and I believe he's in public policy and economics, and he served as a diplomat in a number of positions. He's very familiar with sort of the inner workings of government and the security state, and he's been around a lot of these people. So it was a fascinating interview. I frankly came away pretty frightened, because as he and I'll say up front, Mel watched the whole thing. I only watched the first half, the first hour. It's a long interview, so she can speak much more to the second part. But I mean, I would say one of his main points was that we're closer to nuclear war than we have ever been. The doomsday clock has us at 90 seconds, which is closer than we've ever been. And, as someone with an 11-month-old, not that the age makes a difference, I think everyone with family is horrified by this, but, it's extremely scary to me. And I've been kind of trying to wrap my head around the interview and everything that Sachs said. And I trust him a lot because he's smart and knowledgeable.
Right. Yeah. He, I liked it. He said, he's a pretty tough critic of all administrations. He's not partisan. He's really not.
No.
But, yeah, I think it is scary. And you living in DC, and I live in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is next to Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, which is the largest military base in the world. So of course, they're we are the target. We are probably the number one target of all of the targets. If there were, in fact, a nuclear attack, we're going out. Fayetteville's done. So I do obviously think about this, and it ticks me off that we have gotten to the point where we do not talk. Like Sachs talked about, the Biden administration has not spoken with their Russian counterparts since February of 2022. Just cut off all diplomatic talks. It's just insane when you really think about it. When you think about what we're doing now. So, but excuse me, Sachs, he took the gloves off. It was so interesting and refreshing to see this man. He just had zero to give about and so he really went hardcore on Netanyahu, on Israel, but specifically Israel's control over the American government. And that was the thing that just kind of sent the, Zionist Twitter over the edge. Just kind of, meltdown after meltdown. And of course, calling Tucker Carlson anti-Semitic, saying he's Hitler. It's so crazy. It was Joel Pollack, who is the editor of Breitbart.
Yeah.
South African, originally from South Africa. I believe he may have served in the IDF. Don't quote me on that though. But he's like, this is the third interview that Tucker has done with a rapidly anti-Israel guest, and we need some explanations as to why. Three people in a whole year, and they demand explanations.
So one thing that really shocked me, and I thought I was relatively up on Middle East foreign policy and issues in the region. And as I've spoken about many times and put on Twitter, my father's Palestinian, so it's something I've sort of grown up with, all of these issues. But I was very surprised that Sachs claimed with a lot of evidence that basically all of the wars that we've been involved in the Middle East and Africa, including Somalia and Sudan, were actually because Israel wants to get into those wars. And not Israel, I shouldn't say Netanyahu specifically, has had this aim to sort of extend Israel's borders, create greater Israel. And part of his plan has been to disempower a lot of the other governments in the region. And this has led to an extraordinary amount of instability, cost millions of lives, trillions of US tax money, made us less safe. And, I used to think, like, maybe these people are just smart. They see something I don't see. Like, I have to believe there's something. And, before COVID, I was like a public defender in New York. I thought, okay, I don't know that much. Maybe they just like know all these things I don't. And then when COVID came along and I realized like the experts don't actually know anything. And then the more I see this and I'm like, these people have no idea what they're doing. Everything they say is wrong. It's not based on reality. They have no idea what Arabs and Muslims want or think. Like, that they've created this illusion in the West that Arabs and Muslims just want to kill them and spread Islam. This is the most garbage idea ever. These people just want to live in peace. But I'm sorry, if you go around bombing people, they're not going to like you. It's kind of basic.
Right. Yeah. So I always think of it as like there's like two tier, right? So you have the actual like the elite, like the real, like the puppet masters, right? And they like, know what they're doing. They know what they want. They have specific goals, right? And then everybody below that, right? And I say two tier, but then there's the people below that, and that's where things get kind of hazy, and that's where like the propaganda gets fed in. Where like, oh, and there's always a little truth to it, like sectarian conflicts within the community, but that really gets played up, right? And so we get fed this idea that even Muslims hate each other. They're always fighting the Shias, right? And then we get fed, another idea that's, real vague, and maybe, it's rooted in something where Muslims and Jews just don't get along, and that's because Muslims hate Jews and they want to kill all the Jews, right? And that just kind of like snowballs, right? And then the people at the very top, the puppet masters, they're pulling the strings, doing exactly what they want to do. And they're using these kind of like general myths and whatnot, even though, so they're getting what they want, obviously. And then everybody else is just kind of like fuddling around in the cloud, and people know a little bit, but once you kind of like break through, when you really start examining those things that are told to us, you start realizing that, hold up, this doesn't actually make any sense. Or actually not the reality on the ground. So what's happening here? And that's when you have to like, you break through and you realize, okay, so who is behind this? And I think what you see when you start digging into Israeli politics is that there has been, really since the mid-90s, a real struggle for the heart of Israel. Totally separate, like just totally separate from the struggle with Palestinians, but within Israel of what they want their state to be, right? And I think what after this 30-year struggle, essentially, which kind of really kicked off with the murder of Yitzhak Rabin. I'm wrong. Who was
Yitzhak Rabin is right, by an extremist Jew.
Right, an extremist. Yeah. So just for people that don't know, this was the Israeli prime minister during the first peace talks with Yasser Arafat in the Oslo Accords, right? They had kind of come to an agreement, and this fanatic, far-right Israeli who did not want to see a Palestinian state whatsoever, he murdered Rabin. And the prime minister that took Rabin's place canceled the accords. And that was really like probably the closest that they ever came to peace, and it was done.
Yeah.
And so...
It was still, even Rabin's offer was not great. It still was like a state where Palestine didn't really have control over its borders. They didn't have, or airspace or all that. So they really still would have been kind of in Israel's control. But
Right. Yeah.
nevertheless, they did come close.
But there was like something, and I think the idea was that basically we're going to prove ourselves, and then we're going to work, and we're going to use that to bargain and build from there. And I don't know. I'm really kind of anti two-state solution. I think I just the way that the West Bank is split up. To me, it's never going to happen because it's just not feasible.
I agree. I mean, 30 years ago, maybe.
Right.
But
before you had all of these little, all of these like settlements and pockets,
yeah,
and walls built around, and you have to drive all of, it's not, you have to have clean cut borders. You just do. If you want to have some kind of flow of commerce, flow of economy, and, sense of community, you can't just have like these little enclaves of a foreign nation.
Right. It's
dumb. And so,
my father always says like his generation he's in his 70s, like they had wanted a two-state solution, my age group and below. They just want to be citizens of Israel with equal rights. And that's what we mean by a one-state solution. We don't mean killing the Jews. We don't mean driving them out of Israel. We mean granting Palestinians full rights in the occupied territories and in Gaza, as they should have. Because if people are living under a government's control, they should have rights and including voting rights and due process and all of that.
Exactly. And so I think there's just been this internal struggle within Israel, and what you've seen really in the last 5 years is the far right win. They just have. They've taken control of the Knesset. They have, Netanyahu has been in. It's so wild to think that Netanyahu is technically kind of considered a more centrist among their politicians. Believe it or not, his coalition is formed with a couple of the quote unquote centrist parties, and so what those people want. So now we broke through. We see, now these are the power holders. What do they want? Well, what they want is a Jewish state in, depending on how far you go, either, the borders that you know of now is Israel, which of course include Gaza and the West Bank. Or if you go a little bit farther right than that, there's probably about 20% who want this greater Israel project, which is, like we've talked about before, from the Euphrates down to the Nile, the Med.
Oh, yeah. And this is like religious fanatics who think, they're reading the Bible literally. God gave us this land. I don't know what they think is going to happen to the Arabs there. I guess they should just die.
Either die or leave. Die or down. The land to the Jews, and it's theirs, and it is their divine right to. And so you think okay, well, why is the U.S. doing this, right? But then you look and you say, okay, well, we've got Lebanon now. Lebanon has been conquered essentially. Hezbollah is weakened to the point of almost non-existing. It's still there, but in no sense that it can form a real opposition. Now Syria's done. Iraq is continuously plagued with, tribal violence, sectarian violence, and yes, so that those greater Israel boundaries cut through Iraq. Interestingly enough, a pretty big chunk of Saudi Arabia as well. Nobody ever talks about that one. I guess we'll know when that comes. But so, in order to achieve this greater Israel, right, they had to take out Lebanon, had to take out Syria, they're going to have to take out Jordan, which they have their puppet in Jordan right now, but they will take him out, and then Egypt, and so.
And of course, Iran is the big one. I mean, I don't think they actually think they're going to expand into Iran, but that's the...
Right. Iran is not actually party to, Iran's territory is technically safe because it just cuts through half of Iraq. But Iran is the only powerhouse that could possibly oppose them now. And so... Again, and of course, Iran funnels arms to Yemen and excuse me, has been kind of fueling these resistance groups in the region for the last 20 years or so. Yeah. And flexing muscle for, its own reasons. And yeah, so I mean, that's the reason why. That's why, right? Like, once you understand that, you can actually see, okay, and then people will say, well, why would the U.S. go along with that? Well, because the U.S. is wholly controlled by the Israeli lobby. They have, they control our politicians through money, through our insane campaign finance laws, and also when they can't do that, they blackmail them. They run honeypot schemes. They run, spy operations. I mean, it's really wild, and it's pretty well detailed by a lot of people, but it's just super taboo to talk about. And yet,
because it's considered like an anti-Semitic trope, but we're not talking about Jews. We're talking about Israel.
Right. Yeah, I know. I had to tell somebody that today. Like, you choosing to throw all Jews under the bus because I criticize the Israeli government is a me problem. Okay, that's not a me problem. And you can off with that, because I'm not going to stop talking about this corrupt government just because you threaten me with that scary A word. I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care anymore either. I used to care a lot. And now I'm like, you know what? You've diluted that so much that like it has no meaning. And I'm not anti-Semitic. I think what the Netanyahu government is doing is disgusting. I'm not even anti-Israel. I would be happy for Israel to thrive if they allowed Palestinians to have equal rights and treated them like human beings. Of course, I'm not happy about the fact that my family and, especially my father, who grew up in the occupied West Bank, have been treated like animals for decades. So, that's, and that I haven't actually gotten to know my family there, because we went once in 1997 when I was a kid, and it was so dangerous. The IDF soldiers would hold guns in our faces. We knew that they could kill us for any reason or no reason. And my dad was like, I'm not taking my kids back here. It's too dangerous. Right. He's been thrown in Israeli detention when he tries to go there. So yeah, anyway.
Well, it's just crazy, being on the right, being a conservative and whatnot. But then also knowing what Palestinians go through, it's maddening for me, because I'm like, all of you tough guys, if you went through a week of what these people have gone through for, 60, 70, 80 years, you would be terrorists too. 100%. You would be
1,000%. Yeah.
0%. Okay. Y'all were ready to become jihadists when they killed somebody's squirrel. All right. Don't talk to me about resistance.
Yeah.
All right. Because you would do the same thing, because it is innate in all of us to seek liberty. Give me liberty or give me death. Period. That is the American motto. And if you are a true American patriot, then that's what you abide by, and you don't lay down and take it.
Exactly.
Trust me.
Well, so speaking of anti-Semites, due to their extreme anti-Semitism, Israel has taken its embassy out of Ireland, where I think there's been like one or two documented anti-Semitic incidents in the last decade or something.
I think there's only like 50 Jews in Ireland to begin with, right? So it's but what's interesting though is that the Irish are Catholic, right? So
mainly,
It's interesting because I'm not Catholic, and I it's funny, I don't know a lot of Catholics. I know maybe 5, and I don't know any Jews in real life. But online, there's like some real conflict between those two. I mean, I come from the land of Baptists, all right? So it's we just don't talk about the Catholics. And
that's funny. I know a lot of Catholics and a lot of Jews growing up in New York.
Okay.
But oh no, go ahead, sir.
In my county, we have about 400,000 people. We have one synagogue, and we have 350 evangelical churches. So
wow.
Yeah. And we have 2 Catholic churches.
Wow. I think I lived in Brooklyn a lot. I think my neighborhoods had way more synagogues and churches, and I always had a lot of Jewish friends. Not as a, but I grew up in a town in upstate New York, and then I moved to New York City, and just always a large portion of my friends were Jewish. My dad also worked in the Near Eastern Studies department at Cornell, so like a lot of the families we knew were Jewish, but
Right, yeah. It's funny to me because I just I've learned so much. I don't know any of the stereotypes at all. So like people
yeah.
will say things to me, and I don't even
Mhm.
realize that that's like they're being rude or whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
but something I've learned in the last year is that there is a lot of friction between Jews and Catholics, and
Yeah.
apparently that's spilled over in Ireland. This
Yeah.
week because the Israeli government decided to shut down their embassy
Yeah.
because Ireland chose to recognize Palestine as a state in the UN, and that's the official, uh, I guess,
Yeah.
reason. Well,
That's
that's the reason, but then they said because of extreme anti-Semitism, but they didn't actually.
But they didn't back that up with anything. And from everything I've read, there's no real anti-Semitism problem in Ireland. And I mean, one thing that's sort of important to note is that Ireland has always had kind of strong ties with Palestine because I think they identify as occupied people. Ireland was, as most people know, was occupied by the British. So there's sort of long been a sympathy, I would say, between the two groups.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the Irish are generally just kind of a little bit stubborn and a little bit, they have that, William Wallace kind of idea of freedom, right? And so I believe the Irish, were really strong supporters of apartheid, or stood against
Yeah,
apartheid in
yeah,
South Africa, and so
yeah.
you gotta love them. I love them anyway.
Yes. Yeah, I have a lot of respect for the Irish, and I appreciate that their leaders have stood strong. The prime minister gave a speech yesterday and basically said, we're not anti-Semitic. We have no problem with Jewish people. We do not. What the Netanyahu government is doing is it's genocide, and we're going to stand up against it. And I wish to God we had leaders like that.
I know. I mean, it's sometimes it's just pathetic. I feel like we're just. I mean, God bless him. I love Thomas Massey, and I love Massey because, of course, he's very America first, America only
Yeah.
kind of thing. So that's just not him, But I'm like, why can't we just get more? I wish, if anything, that he would take like a stronger stand. But I understand why he doesn't. I do understand.
Yeah.
That because, I would actually.
Yeah, I think he does as much as he can, and he's like. I wasn't even sure for a while if he was against the war and got the war in Gaza. I actually hate to use that word because I don't believe it's a war, but because it's just Israel bombing civilian centers for the most part, and event, occasionally killing a Hamas member. But he sort of never directly dealt with that issue and sort of talked more about the U.S. using our money, not abroad. But then he did one or two tweets where he cited like the horrific number of, I think, child amputees and said like we should not be supporting this war. So I think his heart's in the right place.
Oh, definitely, and I understand why, and to a certain extent, I do appreciate the fact that he does keep it America focused, America centric. But yeah, again, but that's like the best, I don't want to say it's tepid, but still, like, we should have people, because heavens knows that if it were anyone else, if it were any other country on the planet doing what Israel's doing right now, we would be invading them, period.
Yes.
It would not even be up for discussion.
Yeah. 1,000%. Yeah.
It's just crazy what is being allowed to happen, but not just being allowed to happen, but what is being, funded and supplied by the American government is shameful. And Joe Biden will go down as the worst president probably in American history.
I hope so. He should. He deserves it, as Jeffrey Sachs said. When it comes to this idea of like, oh, it's okay to bomb tons of civilians so we can kill a terrorist here and there, also they they talk about the numbers in a way that's not actually accurate, and we'll discuss that on the next episode. But imagine if, like, the school shooter, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? I guess it was yesterday. If police had bombed the school to get the shooter, like, people would be like up in arms. I mean, it would be, nobody would ever think that that's acceptable, and yet this has been 14 months of that.
Right. And, I was thinking about this because I was looking at the numbers, and we'll talk more about that on Friday. Yeah. But I was just looking at the numbers of Israelis killed, like in the worst year. It was during the Intifada in the early 2000s. And I believe the highest number was 405 Israelis had been killed in a single year, which is a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. It is. But in a country of 10 million people, that is actually not that many murders per se. The city of Chicago is about 3 million, and they experience about 600 murders a year. So this is, being an American, not being necessarily, hopefully I'm not numb to crime, but I am used to crime and conflict. And when you mesh cultures together, you're going to have conflict. And so as an American, if the U.S. government started, leveling entire housing complexes to get gang members, people would not like it. Never accept it. And yet those gangs perpetrate more violence than the supposed terrorists. And so we would never, and they said, well, you can't treat it the same as domestic crime. And I think, but it is domestic crime. Okay. It's not international crime. You get to play this game with this terrorism label that allows you to get away with a lot, which is no state would ever get away with.
Speaking of which, didn't they just call the United Healthcare shooter a terrorist? I didn't actually get to look at this much. So I saw you said something about it on Twitter.
Oh, yeah. I just saw it right before we came on. So the Luigi Maggioni, I think his name is. The United Healthcare CEO shooter, they charged him with terroristic.
That's crazy.
I was like, I'm sorry, what? Let me see real quick.
I don't know the details of exactly, it's possible, I suppose, but it seems. And did they charge him? It's state, right? Not federal.
Yeah. Let me see. So prosecutors accused the 26-year-old of killing Thompson in furtherance of an act of terrorism, which is legally defined by an intent to intimidate or coerce the civilian population. So they are saying, that because basically they're punishing him for becoming this kind of idol, per se,
Right, exactly, absolutely. Like, if that hadn't happened, they wouldn't be doing that. So I guess the allegation is that he is terrorizing the entire population by targeting this. But that doesn't even make sense. He's in prison or jail. He's in jail. So he's not.
I think what they're saying that the act itself was meant to strike fear in the heart of CEOs and whatnot, and I'm like,
that's ridiculous. You could say that about, and I'm not defending the guy. I don't like him. He should be prosecuted, assuming he committed the crime. I haven't looked extremely carefully at the evidence. I'm not celebrating it at all, but as a criminal defense attorney, former criminal defense attorney, I'm very you have to do this by the book. I mean, that's there doesn't seem to be any evidence that, at least so far. Maybe they know some stuff I don't, but that doesn't seem this seems just like a murder. It's like saying, okay, if you kill a woman, does that terrorize women everywhere?
Well, I think, okay, well then, so basically any kind of motivating, any kind of premeditated murder per se that isn't personal, right? So if you are a school shooter, definitely that would be terrorism. If you, let's say again, if you killed anybody, it's really, if you killed drug dealers, if you killed, I don't know, to me, it just seems like you're giving this special designation because the CEOs feel better.
No, yes. And it seems to be also like a publicity thing. Like they're playing to the public anger over the whole thing, of course, which I never like. I think like criminal law, it's very important to get it right. It's important not to do things to play to the public appeal. He should, from what I understand, the evidence I've seen, he should absolutely be charged with murder, but not this.
Right. Yeah. He, I think it's going to come out that he's probably on some kind of antidepressants. They're going to claim temporary insanity. I bet.
Oh, I think absolutely. When I was like, it's going to be an insanity defense, whether temporary or just regular insanity. But those are an uphill battle. I had one client who ever got one out of hundreds. So.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be tough for him. But what's interesting though is that he is going to have pretty clear. He's going to have a lot of sympathy in the jury itself. And
that'll be a fun jury selection process. Right. Not to make light of murder. I'm not making.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they don't try, if they don't end up pleading something just to avoid the circus that will end up being.
That's quite possible. And maybe this is overcharged so that they give him incentive to plead to something lower. That might actually be the case. Anyway, well, this was another fascinating discussion, and we'll be back in a few days to discuss. We'll be discussing some of the disputes around the civilian casualties in Gaza and whatever else happens this week. We'll also be talking about. So
yeah, we have a special guest.
Yes, we'll have our first guest. So see you soon.